This is Bob Brooks, host of the Prudent Money Radio Show. So I got a question for you today that I posed on the program, and it goes like this: do people spend more or less money if they're anticipating inflation? The answer may actually surprise you, and also might give us a clue as to why we're getting so many conflicting indicators and signals when it comes to really what's going on in the economy and compared to all the forecasts of gloom and doom. So we talk about that, but the one thing that I want to make sure that you are aware of, there are certain things you should be doing with your portfolio, with your investments, with your retirement, and I'd love to give you the opportunity to hear some of that specifically based on what you're doing with your retirement. And all you have to do is go to the website, prudentmoney.com. You're familiar with it. And just go ahead and go to or send me an email at info@prudentmoney.com or bob@prudentmoney.com. We'll get you on the schedule and just visit about what you're trying to accomplish and how you're trying to get there. And there's no cost to it, and we'd love to visit with you about that. That's all at the website, www.prudentmoney.com. Hope you enjoy the program.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, does inflation make people spend more money? Is that a good thing? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon, this is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Hey, why don't you go on to the website, www.prudentmoney.com, and look for that link at the top of the page, Ask Prudent Money, and ask your questions. I do look at those all the time, and I do answer those questions myself. Very, very committed to that part of the ministry resources that I hope that you'll take advantage of because I know there's lots of questions, a lot of confusion, which is a good lead in to what I'm going to be talking today. It just seems like nothing adds up or makes sense. I said at the beginning of the program, does inflation make people spend more money? We'll get to that, but it is a very interesting question because the answer is it actually does. And when I tell you why it does, it'll start to make sense. But we always come back, and we've been talking about this quite a bit just to make sure that you get a very good understanding of how important the consumer is to this situation we're going through. And I almost question as to what situation are we going through, because what rattled the markets, it seems that President Trump, he laid out all these tariffs, and now he's taking them back. So there's a lot of things that are going on that's just kind of hard to understand. I mean, you hear the difficult stories, and I'm just amazed at some of the stories that I've heard about how inflation has kicked in, and the question I always come back to is why aren't these stories getting national news? And but you see them pretty much all over the internet, and I look at it and think, where are the high prices? Surely they're coming. Where is evidence, though, of inflation? Now, we've always, as we've discussed, we've had a level of inflation that has been kind of a steady part of our consumer lives that hasn't gone away. So we're used to that, but if you talk to most economists and people on Wall Street, they're going to tell you that it's either coming or it's here. And I I've talked about this in the past. I do all the grocery shopping for my family, and I enjoy going to the grocery store. I know that sounds kind of weird, but if you understand what I'm talking about, you know what I mean. It feels a sense of accomplished that you've built a shopping list, you've built a menu, and you got it all organized. There's just something about that. But I go to the grocery store and I'm always constantly looking at prices. And I'm not seeing any kind of increase in prices. And which is kind of surprises me just a little bit. So, the consumer is very, very important when it comes to holding all this together, because the consumer represents 2/3 of the growth in the economy. 2/3 of the growth of the economy. So if consumers are expecting higher prices in the future, they might spend more today. But here's the catch. If they're also worried about losing their jobs, they're probably not going to be spending more money. So it's a very odd combination of I don't know what you would call it, maybe attitudes and beliefs of what's going on, and then you've got, last year was such an odd year for the economy, because I remember talking about all the different indicators, what they were pointing at. I mean, these are pretty solid indicators you can depend upon, flashing signals of a recession. We already had the inflation issues, so they would combine for a pretty mean situation. And I got to thinking about it. It's almost like preparing for a bad weather. You know that you're going to get snow, but you might get ice as well. Or you might just get ice and not snow. But then again, you might get snow and ice, which is the worst combination, because you can't see all that ice that's underneath snow. Well, that's the same way as the situation with the economy. You're probably going to see a recession, but I don't know. The inflationary signals are kicking into high gear, and we're starting to see that. What if we see both of them together? We've talked about that. But what lenders are reporting is an uptick in spending in the first quarter versus a year earlier. Now, you might be thinking, why would I go out and spend money in with this particular uncertainty that's going on in the markets? Well, people are looking to pull forward what's called pull forward of future purchases. In other words, people are defensively buying stuff today that could become more expensive under President Trump's tariff policies. So with higher inflation expectations, lower income households, and stronger increases in their spending on durable goods, now that's stuff that lasts long enough to make you worth purchasing for the future. This is the way people are looking at it. They're looking at, okay, I need to replace the refrigerator. It's not gone out. Still working. Everything's still fine, but it's making that loud noise. You know what I mean? And my refrigerator's doing this right now, making this loud noise, and I keep thinking, is it on its last leg? I did this with my water heater, because I just didn't want to spend the money. And finally, when I started hearing something bang inside the wall, 23 years I had that water heater. But when I started hearing things bang in the wall, I thought my luck is seriously about to end, and I better get somebody out here to replace the water pump, which I did. Well, and then, but people are looking ahead and saying, well, I want to secure today's prices before they go up. There's some wisdom in there, but I would also suggest, like I mentioned in the title of the program today, does inflation make people spend more money? Yes, it does. Is that a good thing? Is that the best thing for you, is to go out and spend probably money, maybe money that you don't have, but you're justifying it because, well, you can get it 20, 30, 40, 50, maybe 50% cheaper. And what are you going to do when that appliance goes out? But if what Dallas Fed researchers also found that if consumers perceive economic risk like job losses, they might spend less regardless of their expectations for prices. Any positive quote-unquote effect that inflation expectations may exert on consumption could be null and void if accompanied by anticipated higher unemployment. So welcome to stagflation. And we've talked about this. People will, it's really interesting. Let me back off and come back to that in a second. You have inflation. Here's our economics lesson for the day. You have inflation where prices go up. Then you have deflation where prices go down. In inflation, people might be more inclined to spend money because they're trying to lock in today's prices, knowing tomorrow's prices could be higher. In deflation, which we had for a long time, and with deflation, prices continue to fall. They've continued to go lower, much lower. And so people wouldn't buy because their expectations are that deflation was going to drag prices so much lower and there'll be a good deal at some point. So, it's kind of one of these things that is very confusing on what to do, very confusing on how it affects the consumer, how that ultimately affects investments, how that goes to affect your situation with your retirement. And there's a lot of people, rightfully so, who are very concerned about the retirement. We'll get back to that here in just a second. This is Bob Brooks. I'm up against a break. Stick around. I'll be right back.
Hello, this is Bob Brooks. Proverbs 22:3 and Proverbs 27:12 are the exact same verse word for word. I call them the stewardship verses of risk. A prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. On the Prudent Money Radio Show, we teach about risk, how to identify it, how to figure it out, and what to do about it. We believe that to be a prudent steward, you have to be a good risk manager. Listen to the Prudent Money Radio Show on Bible School Radio 91.3. Prudent Money, home of the modern-day steward movement.
Dynamic, practical, life-changing.
There's no point in going to church and not letting the Christ who gave birth to the church on the day of Pentecost change your life.
Join us each day as Pastor Paul Shepherd applies the timeless truth of Scripture to everyday life. It's Destined for Victory on this great station.
Weekday afternoons at 3:30 here on Bible School Radio, KDKR.
The Apostle Paul was zealous to proclaim the gospel. As we trace his final mission trip, we'll learn how he remained gospel-focused and spirit-led as he handled opposition, taught effective leadership, and lovingly encouraged and warned the early church. Listen this week to Truth for Life with Alistair Begg.
Weekdays at 5:30 a.m. here on 91.3 KDKR.
Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Hey, listen, if you haven't done so, go to the website, www.prudentmoney.com. And go up to the top of the website page, and there's a Ask Prudent Money. You're welcome to send a question in. Let me hear what's going on. And I'm getting a lot of feedback. A lot of questions, a lot of worried people. And I get that. You know, you don't want to spend a whole lot of time paying attention to what you're reading on the internet and websites you go to, emails that you get, because if you read these, most of which are not too positive of what they think is going to happen, you can get real caught up into it. Can I suggest another alternative? Very simply, instead of getting anxious about things, get some hope and some solid confidence about things by praying about it. I was thinking about something that's really been on my mind. And over the weekend, I said, "What am I worrying about?" And I started praying about it, and all those worries and all that anxiousness just goes away. Because at the end of the day, God is with you, and I think we have a tendency to forget about that. And I know I can speak for myself. You know, it's such a different filter that we look at things at, and we process our thoughts through when we stop and think, hey, I got the Holy Spirit inside of me. I mean, what in the world do we have to worry about? And it's just a different perspective that it's easy to forget. It really is, and I'll be the first person to say that. So consumers who may be buying these big durable goods, the appliances, I don't think buying a brand new flat screen television, although they are pretty cool, the new ones, you know what I'm talking about. If you've been into a Best Buy or wherever you like to go to buy those types of things, I don't think that's a durable good. But I could be wrong. So don't get off the radio and say, Bob said that prices are going up and we need to go buy one right now. But here's what's interesting to me. The researchers at the Institute wrote recently that crowd data suggests the consumers are easing up on nice to have, in quotes, spending by pulling back across travel, tourism, leisure spending, and I'm going to go there. I'm going to name the one thing that we all have issues with. We all spend way too much money on restaurants, eating out, takeout. I mean, it's just that's what we do in Dallas, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We eat out too much. I love this story. I had a doctor and his wife come to see me, and he looks at me and he says, Bob, because we just spend way too much money. I mean, I make a good income. By the time we get to the end of the month, I'm looking on what I can stretch to make it all work. I said, great. Go home and just jot down what you're spending your money on. Don't get into the budget box. Just write down what it is that you're spending money. Just try to be as accurate as possible. Then come back and see me in a couple months. So off the doctor and his wife went. They came back, came walking into my office, and just looked like the life had been drained out of him. I couldn't tell if he was embarrassed, maybe angry. I don't know. I was questioning my assignment, or it didn't go well for him. I don't know what it was. So I said, "So tell me how things are. They're going for you." He goes, "We spend $2,500 a month. $2,500 a month eating out." And he just kind of sitting there, head hung low. He was embarrassed. And I said to him, I said, "I think that's great." And he looked at me with, like I got a third eye or something. And I said, "No, I think it's great because all that is just data. And what that data tells you is that you are exercising what you value. You and your family value eating out. So embrace that. Unless you have a conflict with it, embrace it. That if it works for you and you can keep it all in control and it doesn't affect any other aspect of your life, doesn't cause any stress, doesn't hamper your freedom, doesn't dig into your long-term goals, doesn't cause debt, doesn't affect your relationship with Christ, go out and eat." And I think he got the point. The point is that where we spend our money is what we value on. And that was a long way to get back to my point. These researchers are suggesting people are going to pull back on restaurants. I would be, even during COVID, people still did takeout. I mean, you saw it. It was just unbelievable that they risk catching something because they had to go eat out. They had to go pick up takeout. But we'll see. I mean, this is what we're seeing in the numbers, and the numbers are very, very confusing because one will say one thing, the other will say the other. They'll be in conflict with each other, and that's kind of where we are. I think that this week will tell the story somewhat of what's really happening. We get growth in the economy, the GDP report this week. We get a lot of economic reports. As April winds down, and believe it or not, May is on its way. That's just unbelievable to me. Next thing you know it, half the year is going to be gone as we enter June and exit June. And I guess this is what happens when you get older. At least that's what I've been told. So it'll be interesting to see the trends that start. The one thing that I will say as a warning, though, if indeed we get a combination of inflation and recession going at once, it's something that takes a while to kind of come together, and it takes a while to affect all areas of the economy. But when it does, it's like it has a grip on things, and you can imagine it's hard to get rid of. Think of it this way: part of there's two conditions that make up stagflation. As I said, it's inflation meets recession. And so if you want to solve the recession problem, you lower interest rates. If you want to solve the inflation problem, you raise interest rates. And so raising interest rates hurts the economy. Lowering interest rates increases inflation. You can't, I mean, it's like a perfect storm. Now, there is a scenario where that doesn't happen. And I'm not so convinced it's going to happen. I just have to see more. And I think this is where the Federal Reserve Board stands, where Federal Reserve Chairman Jay Powell is in conflict. Well, more so Donald Trump's in conflict with Jay Powell. And why he went on the rampage of wanting to fire him, which he can't do. So he thinks that we got to take a step back and watch things develop. It's a dangerous path to go on because things can grip the economy very, very quickly. But I think we don't want to overreact. It's just like with medicine in a patient who's sick. You don't want to just start shoving needles in their arms and giving them all kinds of medications. You want to give them a baseline and see what happens. I think that's what they're doing there at the Fed. This is Bob Brooks. You got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time. Keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.